So, welcome to the Royal High School and our session on 2.3 Learning, Teaching and Assessment. So, session aims then, so just pop together what you probably would like to cover in this session. So, we've got key policies, our self-evaluation process, our CLPL, assessment approaches, tracking, monitoring and reporting, moderation, looking outwards, and then of course get into the inspection part of what is it that they're actually looking for. How were we highlighted as being an establishment that had very good practice, the suite of evidence that I was able to provide, which helped to determine that, what they're looking for in classrooms, and that's when I'll hand over to Aisling to share her experience, and then supporting staff as well as any questions. So, first little part that we've got here is we've got our policy and toolkits in terms of learning and teaching. Have a sound and robust learning and teaching policy. A lot of this will be like teaching granny to suck eggs. I know you'll probably have all these things in place, but it's kind of just a reminder of kind of the basics, and it is when the inspectors come in, exactly what they're looking for in terms of hitting the ground running. So a sound and robust learning and teaching policy, ensuring a shared understanding across staff regards the features of an effective lesson. Supported and explained by pedagogical research, collaborative document co-created with staff with consultation and review before implementation. Pupils, of course, being part of the consultation process, and an associated toolkit to allow staff to implement the policy. So hints and tips and strategies that you'd be able to use in the classroom. And I've got those documents that are available online so you can see what our ones look like. Please do just lift what you need to, adapt and change it to your context and setting. That is absolutely fine to do. We're making those freely available for everybody. One of the first things that the inspectors asked when they came in was, can we see your learning and teaching policy? Yes, here it is. And what will we see when we go into classrooms? And they want to see what's in that document replicated in classrooms at the point that they walk in. So if they're walking in for the first half of the lessons, we've got something established that's called Engage in Leaps. And the first part is the engagement, the starter tasks, and then the learning intentions. So I'm telling them in that document, this is what's been established and been agreed with our staff and along with our pupils, and this is what you will see in classrooms. And if that is reflected in what they are able to see during their visits, then that's what's going to elevate your feedback. Pop along here. Okay, so next little part is the self-evaluation process. So in Royal High School, we call it the walkthrough process. This is something that many of you will probably just be getting back to at the moment after the COVID experience restricted everybody to behind their little zones in classrooms. And something that we did to kind of get used to kind of going on classroom visits is about this time last year. We did a February to Easter mini walkthrough where we did sort of 10-minute episodes, short episodes in classrooms, again, linked to our teaching and learning policy so that we could get a snapshot and a lay of the land of the different sort of teaching and learning strategies that were being used in the classroom. And at that point, we were actually really, really encouraged by what we saw. And the one thing that we kind of picked up on as being not missing necessarily, but something that needed a little bit of work was that getting back to that kind of collaborative learning process, that active learning process, which had been taken away from lots of people during COVID. So from the back of that, we then asked the staff, what would you like to see? We've had a wee bit of a gap of about 3 years of not having a traditional evaluation process. What would you like to see in your walkthrough? This is yours and it belongs to you. And they came back to us and said, we'd like something really collaborative. We have had that sort of feeling that in the past it's been something that's done to us, right, by SLT, by curriculum leaders, and we'd really like to be part of that process. So this year, staff were given a choice of whether to go for the traditional one where SLT just visited and made their feedback, or if they would like to do it as within their faculties alongside SLT and CLs, and predominantly that was the preferred choice. And that has led to a system whereby all staff participate really well in this. It's a shared classroom experience, not even just amongst SLTCLs and so on, but the staff within the faculty have got an opportunity to view each other. And the feedback has been overwhelmingly very, very supportive of that. And the one thing they want to do, kind of progressing onwards, which is what I'm going to have a look at in the next couple of months, is actually pushing that further outwards so that they can go and visit other factories and share good practice across the school, not just amongst themselves. And that was something that the inspectorate really picked up on and they really liked. And this idea that actually all staff were involved in the kind of the creation of that self-evaluation process, that they had that kind of choice to participate, but it wasn't a you have to, right? So we were very welcoming with the idea that we'd like you to do it, and actually the vast majority of our staff chose to participate in that process. One of the things that we did to enable us to gather valid feedback as well as we started using the stuff that's available to us digitally, so Microsoft Forms. So we tailored our forms to the elements of our teaching and learning policy, and then that's what we were essentially looking for when we went into lessons. So it might have been the first sort of 25 minutes or the second 25 minutes of a lesson, we kind of just replicated what was done during inspection times. We asked our staff to rag themselves, look through the challenge questions in Higgios 4, and then actually identify their weaknesses, where their weaknesses were, what they wanted to work on, and then the idea would be that by the end of the process, they would rag themselves again and hopefully shift from a red or an amber towards the green. And I think that's been very successful this year, and something that we'll be continuing to develop as we go forward. A strong provision of in-house ELPL. There's lots of offerings. Obviously, I know that not everybody's coming from an Edinburgh setting. There is a citywide, very supportive programme of teaching and learning ELPL, as Edinburgh people will know. But something that we found really valuable was to make sure that we had it as an in-house programme as well, and actually use the expertise that we had here and tap into what people's strengths are. And it turns out there's a plethora of different strengths across our school, which we were able to utilise really well. Alongside our teaching and learning workshop, working group, which I think we actually have a strong representation from across the faculties, again with different strengths, and we've been able to break that up into kind of subgroups where people are looking at different things. For example, formative assessment, some are looking at digital, some are looking at professional learning communities like Ashling here. Top Tip Tuesdays, this is a really easy one to do. So every Tuesday I'll send out a wee digital snippet, just so that people, when we're using our digital facilities and our digital learning, that little things that people may not be au fait with, here is a short sharp tip that you might be able to implement in your classroom and into your classroom teaching. So it might be things that have appeared on our iPads. We are one-to-one with our iPads, like Microsoft Translator. You haven't got a chance to use it at the moment, but here's a wee quick snapshot, a video of me using it. Takes a minute. You can tune into that when you want, and then see if you can try that in your own classrooms as it suits. Teach meets as well, we've got on a regular basis. So we did have these quite frequently, maybe once a week or once a fortnight, and actually what we were finding is that was a little bit of an overload. Would invite staff to participate, come along, and it was staff led as well. So it might be things like a formative learning strategy, or it might be effective starters or effective plenaries, leading a session after school. And we were finding it wasn't well attended, but actually moving it to once a term so people aren't feeling quite so overloaded, offering some cakes in between as well is always a wee bit of a bonus, and we've got a much better attendance there, and people kind of sharing their own pedagogical practice, what they've found out. And then kind of in the run up to the end of term, in a couple of weeks time, we're having all of our probationers deliver their professional inquiries and sharing that with staff who would like to come along. So again, kind of just getting that kind of collaborative nature of what we're doing into not only just our everyday practice, but our in-house ELPL as well. And you know, I think staff really value being called upon to share their expertise as well, instead of me, who is no longer, you know, in the classroom apart from the odd dabble in advanced higher, telling other people what to do and how to do it. Then what I do is I take all the Top Tip Tuesdays, the information from the Teach Meets, and I pull it into a termly teaching and learning bulletin. Again, I do that digitally. That can be done however you want it, and then that means everything's in the one place, so you don't have to scroll back through your emails. You don't have to kind of, you know, do the wider searches that go and doorstop people, because I've pulled it all together, and people can access that whenever, wherever. And of course, we do have some compulsory ones as well with our CAT afternoons. We've got our Friday afternoons off, in inverted commas. You know what that means as a teacher. And so that means that we use our time to, sometimes when we think that there's a real whole school priority, for example, differentiation, we'll lead a whole school session in the hall. But again, much more collaborative. Not this kind of thing where it's me delivering sessions to people, but getting people to share their ideas and their expertise. And again, we use our digital technology well to enable that. Next little part I've got here is our assessment approach. Now, I know that this is kind of, as we kind of go back to what is considered normal compared to pre-COVID, and I know the SQA are obviously extending their, what they're including in subjects and topics and so on, and the return of the assignments next year. Kind of partly to cope with the stresses that are placed on pupils, but also teachers. We moved to a slightly different system from the traditional prelim system a few years ago, whereby we changed it to it was initially a 3-phase assessment system, and this year it's been a 2-phase one. So it gave teachers and pupils a little bit of flexibility in terms of when they were going to sit an assessment. So we would have assessment term 1, which runs between sort of October and Christmas, and assessment term 2, which runs between January and March. And teachers can schedule their assessment whenever they want to. The big difference is we've not got the hall set up like we would do now. These assessments take place in classrooms. That obviously has its challenges. We know that there are some subjects that have longer exam diets. For example, I'm a historian, my advanced higher one's 3 hours long. However, you can split your assessments into kind of manageable chunks and do it that way. We know that the feedback from pupils has been really positive, and that it helps them manage their mental health, their anxiety, and it also allows teachers that little bit more room to kind of plan, mark, and give the assessments out when is suitable, rather than thinking I need to squeeze a full assessment in December because that's when the prelims are scheduled. The SQA are fine with it. Okay, so there's nothing to say in their documentation that you have to run a replication of the final exam. They are fine with you running it in different chunks if you want to. So that's something that we have done now. With the return of the full courses and the assignments and so on, that will be up for review, because March is obviously typically a time where all of these assignments take place. So we might have to shift this a little bit. We'll do that again in consultation with our CLs, with our staff, and with our pupils. Something that's been a kind of a vital thing though is sharing that calendar of assessments when they are planned with our pupils and then our parents. So that is a document that remains on our website. It goes up at the start of the year. So for me, sitting higher history, I know that on the 22nd of February, blocks 1 and 2, that's when I'm sitting it, and that's not movable. If it does have to be movable, there needs to be a good reason. Teachers need to communicate that with SLT, who then, in consultation with the pupils, then re-communicate that back out. So it's not fixed in stone necessarily, but it just gives people the planning capacity and the mental breathing space to be able to plan that effectively. And if anyone wants to know what that like in practice, do just get in touch and I can share you with our spreadsheet. If you go to our website and go to senior phase assessments, you will get this year's schedule, so you can see exactly how it's planned. And it will always run in the same periods. So for example, if you had history periods 1 and 2 on a Wednesday, that's when your assessments would be. It can only be in periods 1 and 2 on Wednesday for the entire year, so that there's not a clash with any of your other subjects, and it stops teachers competing against each other for who needs what space and what time and so on and so forth. So that's what we've got in place there. Tracking, monitoring, and reporting and supporting parents. So I'm sure this is something that you all have in place in your school as well. But when the inspectorate came in, they were looking for not necessarily the design of the tracking system. They want to know that there's something that's operational and it works, but what are you doing with that data is the really important part. So I've got really excited about all my colour coding and things like that, and they were after 2 minutes of me showing them this and I had all my documents laid out, they're like, we don't doubt that your tracking system is sound. What are you doing with the data? And that's what they were more interested in. So we've got that, which allows evidence of progression and the recording of the levels. The thing that they were really excited about is that our tracking system enables us to follow all the protected characteristics and allows us for judgment on the requirement of any interventions. So after each tracking period, what I do is I pull all that data, I pull all the specific data for the different protected characteristics, hand that back out to the curriculum leaders, who can then make targeted interventions for those individuals if required. Then we do that for all the pupils who obviously don't have protected characteristics as well, so that everyone has the same right of access to any interventions. There's a planned calendar of tracking and reporting. Again, this is something that I'm sure you've all got well established, and it seems fairly straightforward, but these are the kind of things that they were looking for evidence of. And then one thing that we found really valuable is we held an online session for parents which clarified levels and what judgments go into making levels in the broad general education. We get a lot of, and as I guess I'm sure you guys all do as well, a lot of chat from parents going, I don't know what this means. What does 3W mean? Well, we were this the last time. I don't understand this. What does the progression from the levels mean? So we put on a session, me talking on a PowerPoint for half an hour with interaction from parents, and we've kept that as a recording that we just passed out to parents if they're confused at all about any of our reporting systems that are in place. Moderation processes as well. The inspectors were very keen to see that we had a robust moderation system in place. So here's just a kind of a wee outline of what we have implemented with our staff. So a common sense approach to moderation, 3 formal and inverted commas moderation episodes within the academic year, a quality assurance plan for your faculty, recording and evidence and work that you've moderated with a minute of the details and those involved in the decision-making process. So that's the evidence that they want to see as well. And moderation of looking outwards. They were really keen on making a strong differential for staff in terms of the understanding between verification of levels or judgments within senior phase and moderation. And the one thing that they would like us to return to, which we kind of haven't had the opportunity to do in its greater sense, would be the post-COVID kind of looking outwards, going to other schools, making those judgment of levels, especially in the broad general education, where we haven't had those opportunities quite in the same way that we probably would have had kind of in the pre-COVID environment. There are things and tools that you can use to help you. And I don't think I'm giving anything away here by saying that this is actually developed by one of the inspectors. So when I said, oh, we've been using this, she started to laugh and she said, I developed this. I was like, amazing, we've hit it, right? So she was really happy that we're using the documentation that was on Education Scotland. So go and have a route around Education Scotland, see what's there to help you with your moderation process, with your evaluation processes, and use the stuff that they're giving you, because that it's not necessarily an expectation, but it's certainly going to go in your favour because it's got all the boxes to tick on it. So this is just a wee sample of where I managed to when I was CL of History, to sort of bundle our experiences and outcomes, the assessment elements that went with that, and the moderation that was going into the back of that. And they really liked the sort of the chat around that. Looking outwards as well is really important. Some of you may recognise your school emblems there. Apologies if I have looked outwards towards you and I haven't included you here. I just chose a few that I've been in communication with recently. So establishing valuable relationships looking outwards, magpie moments. A lot of our good practice, as Pauline said in our first session, is stuff that we've kind of stolen from elsewhere and we've kind of tweaked and moderated to suit our environment and to suit our context. Self-reflection is something that they're very, very big on and holds a huge value for all of us. And I know that they like seeing evidence of that. They liked seeing minutes of when we had met up with other schools, what we'd discussed, what we were going to put in place in the back of it, and then the follow-up after a reflection process. And moving forwards for continuous improvement. So that sort of 3-phase thing of looking inwards, looking outwards, and then moving forwards. I'm not going to read this list here. That will be available. It's quite small as well here. Can we go back one? Oh, we've got it there. It's okay. But it is there for you to access when you want to. And this is the evidence that I handed the inspectors as they came in the door. So we had everything that we could prove ready, printed, and good to go. And I obviously will chat about inspection in a wee minute. If there is something that you're missing, but you know you've got it, and they'll say, I would like to see evidence of this, you can actually just say to them, it's fine, I've got it, I'll print it out for you, here you go. But typically what my experience was in terms of learning and teaching is I provided all this evidence ahead of time, had their first morning to kind of look through everything that they wanted to. That was behind closed doors. I don't know how much they'd looked through it or not. And then they came and asked me the questions the following morning. And they did, when I said, well, we've got this policy, we've got this, that, or the next, and they said, yes, I did see that. Yes, I did see that. I noticed that you mentioned this in one of your documents, or you had this evidence. So they engage you in your conversation with what the suite of evidence that you've provided. And again, that is the list of the stuff that I gave them. Yours may look different than that. You may have other things to add in. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong list or checklist there. This is just the stuff that I gave over because that's what I had ready and good to go. So what are they looking for in the classroom as well? I'll hand over to Aisling in a wee minute once I've chatted through this slide. And Aisling, what I'll do is I'll probably just swap with you so you can talk to the camera, so you can talk to the people online as well, yeah? That your classroom evaluation of teaching and learning still correlates with what they see in your classrooms. The first conversation that we had on that Tuesday morning after they'd looked at the suite of evidence on the Monday was, what are we going to see when we go into classrooms? Now, by that point, they'd actually already been out and about, you know, popping in here and there, but it's not an extensive look. It's just a kind of getting the lay of the land, getting a wee feel of what's going on. And so I just told them truthfully, here's my self-evaluation of learning and teaching at Royal High at this point in time, within our context, within a post-COVID environment, with all the restrictions lifting, and back to what was perceived as, you know, sort of normal practice. Here's what we've been able to do so far in terms of supporting staff. Here's the mini walkthrough that we did before Easter. Here's what I think you're going to see. And that was essentially it. So it was a chat through the top thing that I said that you're going to see is you're going to see relationships. So that's something I felt was one of our key strengths, and I wanted to highlight the strong relationships between our teachers and our pupils. I said that I think you will see in action the Engage and Leaps policy. So whatever point in the lesson that you walk into and however long you stay for, it should be particularly evident what point in our teaching and learning policy they're at. So if it's an engagement, you should be seeing a starter, you should be seeing clear learning intentions and success criteria. If you go at the end, you should be seeing the plenary in action, so on and so forth. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, does my evidence and what I think my teachers are like, does that reflect on what they're doing when they're popping in and out of classrooms? Awareness of needs and those needs being met, and Aisling will tell you a wee bit more about her experience of that in a moment or two. And it feels very much like they're kind of hovering and just going and chatting to kids and so on, but they're really digging into what they're doing, asking kids about what the purpose of their learning is. Do they understand the success criteria? What are they doing to, you know, to progress within the lessons? Show me the materials. Oh, okay. If you are using digital learning, how are you using it? How is that aiding your learning? Have you got any barriers? How is your teacher help you overcome your barriers? There's lots and lots of wee conversations going on there. And I think that for some teachers can be very off-putting and very nerve-wracking, but actually they're also kind of watching what you're doing in the background, and seeing that everything that in your teaching and learning policy is being met within the classroom. Successfully differentiated classrooms and learning, that one is a challenge, and I've deliberately put that it's not just differentiated teaching and learning, but classrooms as well. And that's something we picked up on as being a key strength of ours, that as soon as you walk through a classroom door, that should be a differentiated environment. We've got more learners coming through with more identified needs more than ever, as I'm sure you all know and agree with that observation. And it's about how we were meeting those needs. And that's one thing that our digital learning was picked up on as being a considerable strength, but also all of the stuff that our teachers are doing for our kids every day in every lesson. Pupils able to articulate learning, purpose of learning, knowledge of levels, engagement with progression, and then effective question, higher order skills, pupil-led activities and learning. One of the things that I'm still kind of harping on at my teachers is the teacher chat, and I'm doing that now, but with the tendency for teachers to kind of step in, provide the answers, that worry about kind of pace and challenge, kind of move on to the next bit, get the next activity on the go. But they're really keen on having that learning led by pupils, and the teacher kind of very much stepping back as the facilitator, but also being able to use that sort of extra skill of being able to use their questioning to provoke higher order thinking. Digital technology, and I'll come back to that, it's obviously dependent on where you are within your journey. So if you're a school that's just got their iPads and you're nowhere near this, where we are with it, don't panic about that. They are not expecting you to have 9 years of embedded work on display within the classroom, but they will expect to see a reflection of where you are on your journey within the classroom, depending on where you are. Effective learning intentions and success criteria and skills, and they're really, really keen that there's a differential between the learning, the purpose of learning, what is to be learned, and then the success criteria, so the details of what is being taught within the classroom. And that's something that our teachers really kind of struggled with, and we did a lot of work in kind of preparation from inspection and getting those two things right. And there are some departments in our school that are doing amazing work with that. Science are very strong, geography are very strong, history, modern studies are very strong with those things right now. And that's something that they were able to see. And it's something that we're kind of ongoing still working with. And one of our big suggestions is actually having big questions, thematic questions that can kind of illustrate the purpose of learning. What is it that we're trying to learn here? And then digging in with success criteria. Well, here's the steps I'm going to teach you today, and you're going to be successful within that. Aisling, I'm going to swap with you now. I can give it, you can come over here, yep, and then I've got any questions here. But what I'll do is I'll let Aisling deliver a wee 5-10 minute chat about her experience of inspection as a classroom teacher extraordinaire, and then we'll open it to the floor for any questions. And hopefully the people online what I'll do is when we open it to the floor for questions, I'll repeat the question that I'm given from the audience here, and then you'll be able to hear the answer, and hopefully that will kind of cover all bases. Aisling, the inspectors will allow you to highlight people who you think show good practice in your school. And again, that is kind of part of knowing your staff, knowing your teachers. So I was able to say, you need to go and see Miss Masterton because she's outstanding. And then they went and saw her, and that's why she's here today to talk to you. Great. So I know. So I'll hand over to Aisling to give you her experience.
Oh, we can't hear. I don't know if you can hear this, but we can't hear people online.
be a little bit of a weakness. And then hopefully you'll be able to kind of make the moves to improve on that. Now, you might have somebody within your faculty that is a superstar at it, and that's great, and they can maybe lead that element of your walkthrough, and other people can then kind of, you know, see what they do, emulate that in their own classrooms, try it, improve it. So trying it and improving it is kind of the sort of the basis of what we were doing there, and it seems to have worked. A lot of people picked things like, can you come and see how we're doing starters? We know we've got some strengths there, but we'd like to work as, can you come and see our learning intentions? A lot of people chose the one that's the kind of the generic learning one, which is the activities which are very differentiated, meet the needs of all learners, which actually isn't a bad one to go for. So I guess in terms of your context, you could totally decide what your preference would be. Would you like a whole school focus, or would you like faculties to individually pick what it is that they want to work on, and then go from there? We have visiting CLs come from other faculties to take part in the walkthrough as well. So for example, if it's the English walkthrough, the CL of Art might come as the kind of the fresh pair of eyes from somewhere else, along with the SLT visitors, and then they did their own wee round robin observations and fed back collaboratively at one of their departmental meetings. So that's how we did it. Again, it's not necessarily a right or a wrong. The inspectors did like it though, because it kind of got everybody involved in the process rather than it being a sort of a top-down effect. Hi.
Another question. Off the back of that, how did faculty feed back to the whole school, or did they? And the second question was that I was going to ask was actually about your prelim approach, or your different approach to prelim. And was there any issues with people who having had that experience sitting in a big example for 3 hours? Was there any issues with that, or did they cope with that okay?
Sure. So just for the people online, we've had a question about our self-evaluation progress in terms of feeding back to the whole school. And then we had a question about the prelim process, or our assessment process, and about pupils' anxieties about perhaps not having had the experience of sitting in a hall or sitting a long exam. So I'll do the first question first. So whole school feedback, what I do as the person who's got the overview for our walkthrough process, I gather back all of the feedback. Now within that, individual teachers have been fed back on, so I keep that confidential for them, share that with their faculty leader. I don't share that with anybody else because that's information that's unique to them. If they then wish to have that and share and collaborate, then that's absolutely fine, but I feel that that's something that's got to be done with permission from the teacher. Because we are quite considerate towards our teachers, I think that helps with the buy-in process, and our unions are favourable towards it as well. I know a lot of you maybe apologies, people. I know the online people are getting a poor experience here because we keep dropping in and dropping out. We're just going to have a few more questions and answers, and I'll pop on the chat here as well because I'm not recording the session anymore, so I'll be able to see the chat. If there's anyone who wants to ask a question in the chat, please do go ahead, but I'll keep it open to the floor just now. Is there any more questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what's next with that?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the question there was, where do we go from the report, and our very good practice and some elements highlighted as being excellent or outstanding, essentially. How do we keep the boat moving? How do we keep everybody on board? And I guess that part of that question might be, how do you stop the kind of the apathy, or so on, maybe continuous improvement as well. Yeah. Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. Absolutely. So what I'll be doing in my next part of my process is getting the feedback from everybody on what they liked about this process, but also where the gaps are. It's not a perfect model by any stretch of the imagination. So we'll be getting that feedback from people and what they would like to do and how they'd like to approach it next year. Something that Aislinn's quite keen on doing is actually having things like the faculty focus, like the pedagogical reading, and then putting it into practice tied into PRD, so it becomes just that little bit more meaningful. So we'll be working on that in the next while. I think one of the things that we've got here is our motto, the "We Belong Here," and what we're asking our teachers to do is not just to kind of view that as a kind of tick box exercise. It's something that permeates through every element of what we do, and for teachers to stay relevant and kind of at the edge of what we're doing and to meet the needs of all pupils, then that's where the buy-in is. So you're right, where's the buy-in? Where do we go from getting that? Are we wanting to rest on our laurels, or do we want to be relentless in terms of encouraging people to participate and to continuously improve? Again, you're right, that absolutely is a challenge, but there's definite things and gaps that I'm always reflecting on and identifying and thinking, right, we could probably try that, we could do that. One of the things, like I said, I've identified for next year is the teacher chat, and that was commented on in inspection as well. Just that tendency just to kind of panic a little bit, hands it, chip in instead of the kids doing it. So actually that's something, and again, in my own self-evaluation, is something that's come out through every single faculty's walkthrough. So actually what I'm doing next year is that's going to be the big focus in terms of the school, but obviously faculties can identify their own focus. We've got a huge turnover of staff as well. So as much as we've got a lot of people who stay here for a long time, we've got a lot of people who are newly trained, probationers, coming in from different places. We just excellent teachers who go off and be curriculum leaders and so on elsewhere in other schools. So there's those opportunities for development for our staff to, if we're creating excellence, we know that they're going to fly. So we have to kind of keep that moving. So we have to have that open approach, this conversational approach. This is what we do here, and this is how we do it. And we're in an ever-changing environment. Things change, policy changes by the minute. Digital technologies on the changing every moment. So if we're not at the forefront of those changes as well, then we're not going to maintain that. So we need to be able to just to kind of keep ourselves moving as well. I don't know if that was a satisfactory answer. That felt like that was an unexpected question level there. No, it's good. Thank you so much. Anything else? We've got probably just about 3 or 4 minutes before we move on. Yeah. No, they didn't really. Yeah. Actually, do you want to come up? That was a question about professional inquiry for those online about, did the inspector ask about the level of professional inquiry at your school? So Aislinn's kind of leading on that at the moment, so let her speak about it.
So they didn't ask about it at all, not in the classroom, and I don't think really at a senior leadership level they asked about it as well. But that is definitely something when you're talking about leading change going forward, that's definitely something that we want to like bring in, so like linking, one of the ideas I've got is like linking, and again, this is just a clash, like I'm a classroom teacher, like, but these are like sort of leadership opportunities you get. You can come bring your opinion and see what, see if it'll work. So I think within professional inquiry, we tried to set up a smaller group this year to do it. So the probationers are obviously doing it as part of their course, but with a smaller group of teachers. I think when teachers hear professional inquiry, they're automatically like, I've got too much to do. It's a lot, but it's about breaking it down into smaller steps. So one of the ideas we've got is like linking the PRD with a professional inquiry, with the department improvement plans, with the whole school improvement plan, and that way you're constantly on a sort of ever going upwards sort of spiral,
And that you're doing one thing.
and you're only doing one
only.
thing, and it's not a piece of paper for the sake of a piece of paper's sake, really. So that is definitely like one of the things that we were keen to like move on, but this year obviously it just got a bit much with inspection and everything else on top of it. But that's definitely something that we would want to be developing, is more that, because it's now in the GTC and stuff. So it's one of the things we'd probably quite like to like continue improving, basically.
One of the things as well that I will stress that City of Edinburgh, I'm guessing just most of you are probably here from City of Edinburgh, is that we had a supported visit from our council beforehand. But I think that when we alerted our staff to that they were going to get a pre-inspection inspection, they were like, oh my God. But actually it was so valuable because they were very able in that week to go, here's your gaps. And they put us at a 4 for learning and teaching then. So we were very quickly able to go, these are actually really easy fixes that can elevate us to the 5, because we know it's all there. We just need to put it in place and encourage people and give people the confidence to really kind of perform when they're in the classrooms. And so we did that, and that's what came out when it came to inspection.
Down with your learning intent, like that was really good for some people, because sometimes nobody's going to have actually looked at your learning intentions and like a probationer. So that session was really, really good. Like everyone who went to it had like really positive feedback about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I know that there's lots of questions here in the chat. Because I can access the chat afterwards, I will respond to each of you individually, if that's okay. Or I will put a wee Q&A. Actually, that might be better, just kind of thinking on my feet here. Put a wee Q&A together of any of the questions that are in the chat, and I'll get Pauline to pass that out to everybody so that there's any extra information. But if there is any other questions that come to mind kind of afterwards, or you want to pop me a wee email, you want to any other documents, shared documents, then please do just get in touch. I'm more than happy to have a wee chat of all things teaching and learning. Thank you. That's the end of our session now. Our in-session participants, live participants, are going to head off to their second workshop. And so apologies for all the online learners, that, moments of lockdown returning there where you would drop out the Wi-Fi and things like that. So thanks for sticking with it. We'll get on to CGI again, see if we can get that sorted if we're to do this again. Thank you.